Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for connecting with us today. This is Patrick Brown. I'm here with Bishop Joey Johnson, and we're excited about presenting this GPS grief, pain, and stress conversation regarding an introduction to understanding grief. So we're just really excited about this opportunity. For those of you that are logging on to this Facebook Live, please go ahead and press the share button, do a watch party, tag your friends, connect with others who want to be a part of this conversation and you feel that need to be part of this conversation as well. So again, I just want to thank everybody for connecting. Bishop Johnson, thank you for being here, sir. How's your day so far?
Apostle, Dr. Bishop, Brother Patrick, I'm wonderful. I just want to thank you, even when we get started, for all the work that you put into this in order for us to be able to help people. So I'm just blessed to be on.
I tell you, this is a great time for us to have this conversation. So as folks are connecting, let me just check the status, and hopefully we're seeing some people logged on, and we want you to go ahead and share. Those of you, good to see you. Okay, we see some people that are showing up. All right, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much for connecting with us today. We'll give you a few minutes and just a few seconds to go ahead and press that share button. Perhaps do a watch party, text your friends and connect. We want to have a village conversation. One of the key things that I've learned about conversation is if you want to change the nature of a thing, you must change the conversation. And not only change the conversation, but also change who joins it. And so today, the conversation is critical to us expanding who we are, healing where we are, giving us hope, giving us foundation. And it's so important that as we have these kinds of discussions around understanding grief, this is about understanding it. This is about having insight. I've walked through some grief journeys myself several years ago as my mother was had an incredible diagnosis for dementia and passed from different complications regarding that. During that time, I was also going through my own divorce process as well. So I was experiencing multiple losses in terms of my own life, losses in terms of marriage, losses in terms of just my mindset, different aspects of decisions and choices. And so we must work through those areas in order for us to be people that are whole and healed. And I know people say things like, hurting people hurt people, but really what it is that if we're not addressing where we are and not working on where we are and acknowledging and taking ownership over where we are, then that impacts other people. And so when we're walking through situations and seasons in our lives, whether it be self-inflicted, whether it be decisions or even things that happen to us, how important it is for us to have conversations that lead us on the path of healing. And so that's where we are today. So again, I want to thank you, Bishop Johnson, for being here and being a part of this conversation. And you have been incredibly impactful in helping people unpack that. So what are we here for today? What's on your heart? Let's start there, and then we'll move forward with the conversation today.
Again, my brother, I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing. This is an introductory exposure to grief recovery truths and principles that are used in the grief recovery method. I want to be very clear. This is not the grief recovery method. The grief recovery method is an educational program, the actions of which have proven to help the spirit soar. And so the grief recovery method is a tool to help people recover from loss one heart at a time. Research conducted by the Kent State University have shown that the grief recovery method approach to helping grievers deal with pain of emotional loss in any relationship is evidence-based and it's effective. And in fact, this is the only evidence-based perspective and method in use that has to do with grief. And so the grief recovery method is conducted in conjunction with the Grief Recovery Institute. And what we're talking about, if you need more information, you want to go find out if there are method classes and in your area, you can go online and figure that out. But we're just, it's so exciting just to be able to talk to people in this particular space with the stay-at-home orders, with the COVID-19, with what's happened to George Floyd, to all of the things that are going on, that it's important that we talk about grief right now.
Absolutely. And, in having that conversation, again, as the scripture teaches us, in all thy getting, get understanding. Many times words are hijacked because of how we've dealt with them for so long.
Absolutely.
And so we hijack a word and think we have the understanding of it, and we don't. And one of the things I learned, and even in my journey of grief, was and I think you shared something with me several years ago about this, was don't move away from it, move towards it. Don't move away from your grief. There were times that it's like touching something high. It's like, I don't want to go close to it because of the pain or having to experience certain negative emotions, when emotions are simply emotions. We have to understand why those emotions are there. And so I think the more that we have conversations and we model this dialogue today, and those of you that are watching, as you connect with this conversation and have your conversations in your home with your people that you trust, that are trustworthy, where it's safe and it's loving and compassionate, that today you'll get understanding of that grief, but also take from this modality today and bring that conversation into your home. What are your thoughts on that, Bishop, as far as moving closer to grief?
I think it's really important that we understand. I like the analogy you use. I use another one. Grief is like an onion. You peel the outside layer, you think you're done, but you got to peel till we get to the core. So it's important that we are processing these things so that we might take back pieces of our lives and be able to live effectively in this moment.
Absolutely. So I want to say again, good afternoon to those that are watching from all over. As you're logging on, please go ahead and share this on your pages and do a watch party. Invite some other friends in. We see people from all over that are connecting, and we want to thank you for being a part of the conversation. So let's dive into this, Bishop. Let's talk through, what's happening in the culture. What do you think is the single most off limits topic of conversation in the United States?
I mean, what a powerful question. We're talking about a lot of things. Some people might answer the question. They say, I think the answer to that question is death. But I think they'd be incorrect. Our media is filled with reports and articles about all kinds of death, airplane crashes, sniper shootings, automobile accident. And now we've been exposed to the death of George Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So we don't have any problem talking about or thinking about death. Some people might say sex. Now, that's not a problem. We talk about sex everywhere. Some people will say, well, feelings. Well, we don't have any problem talking about feelings. We have trouble correctly identifying feelings and experiencing them. We don't have any trouble mentioning them. But the single most off-limits topic of discussion in the English-speaking Western world is grief and people's reactions to loss. Now, isn't that interesting? Especially in the light of the fact that we've all experienced some kind of loss in our life, not only in the distant past, but the recent past. Let's talk to our those who are viewing right now. How many of us have experienced the death of a loved one in the past 5 years? So this is a seminar, and if I could see you, I could see you raise your hand, and you see a lot. And when you talk to your loved ones and neighbors about loss, what happened? And how long did it take before you realized that they were not helping you? And how long did it take before you started to figure out that if you act recovered, people will leave you alone? Well, we have not even begun to discuss 42 other potential loss experiences that one can have in a lifetime, as identified by the Holmes-Ross stress test. In America, we teach people how to acquire things, but we don't teach them what to do when they lose things. And Brother Patrick, you've talked about, you have an incredible number of losses that have been accumulating, because grief is cumulative. And so you talked about your mother, and you talked about divorce. Now, you didn't talk about, but I'd like you to talk a little bit about your job, perhaps your children, relationship with your children. What other things did you lose in this period?
I tell you, the past several years, just mentioning that, not only did I lose, divorce, but there was also challenges in my relationships with my children that came as a result of that. So there was that disconnection, that communication issues going on there. At that time, there was also an issue where I lost a major contract in my business. I went from having these resources and having what I needed to not having any of that. Thank goodness for having a plan of savings, but yet it wasn't consistent. So there was a lot of losses, multiple approaches. And then our natural reaction clearly is, you know what, let me walk away from this grief. Let me walk away from this grief and just, hey, it is what it is, or say what will be, que sera, sera, all these different sayings that we say, but we're not moving closer to the grief journey. And so I like what you said about there are 42 other type of losses that have been identified from a cumulative perspective that we need to be able to acknowledge and also accept it, because that's critical in order for us to move forward. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. Can you tell me a little bit about why do you think people move away from grief?
Well, let's touch on that, and let's touch on the fact that let's just touch those other ones that you started to mention. You got the death of the loved one. You could have divorce. Now, here's someone we don't think about: moving, the loss of job or career. You mentioned the loss of health. You could have even have the loss of faith in God. And so this list includes the changes of patterns of behavior, normal patterns like obtaining a loan, all of those things. And so when you see those losses, the series of losses, you've got, think about life. It can be looked at as a series of losses. You're born and you lose the warm, secure environment of the womb. We grow, we lose our innocence. We go to school, we lose our dependence on mom. Well, some of it. When we get to school and pass, we lose all of our acquaintances.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this or not, Brother Patrick, but you will probably not have any people that you graduated with that you started in kindergarten with. You lose all those people. We get toys and teeth that we eventually lose. We lose pets. If you're like me, you lose stamina, fitness, hair on top of your head, looks. We lose loved ones. And so to answer your question, that's an incredible amount of energy that it's down on the inside, and it's negative energy. And so we seek to do something with it. And one of the reasons we don't face it is we seek to repress it, to push it down, because we feel like if I face it, I might not be able to make it.
So if we face it, we already have this presupposition, preconceived idea that if I face it, then I'm going to either crumble, I'm going to be misunderstood because I don't even understand it. Yep. So if I don't understand it, then how can I really understand it's okay, that it's a gift given to me to process these losses or these series of losses? Let's take a step back and let's talk about definitions of grief, because there are misconceptions about it. There's misinformation and wrong definitions. So I want to go back to a few of these definitions that we have concerning grief. Can we go through these and maybe contextualize this for us today?
Sure. Which ones were that, Brother Patrick?
The one that says grief is normal and natural reaction to loss of any kind.
Okay, let me find out where that is. That's what it is. Grief becomes those things that we have to work our way through. They are normal. And what, unfortunately, we don't know that it's normal. And so that's the reason why we started to have this perspective. Let me give a little background before I go there. So I've been working on this whole area since 1982, when a dark night of the soul caused me to examine my personality, the iceberg of my personality. So I started working on the material, looking at Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, going through her material, and her work set the basis for what is being done on grief. And so as I began to look at that, I began to find out that this whole perspective of grief is full of myths, full of half-truths, stuff that we're unaware of. And so what happens is we end up starting to deal with grief from a perspective that we don't really know what we're talking about. We're using the term grief, but we're not quite sure. So I want to hold that just a minute and get down a little bit deeper into the realities, and then go to the discussion of what those really are. And so as we begin to look at that, what happens is we start to deal with the myths of grief. So one of the reasons we don't know what grief is because we got so many myths. Like grief operates in stages. So we got people walking around, am I in stage 1? Am I in stage 2? I am in stage 3. I don't know where I am. Also, that's a problem. And so after reading about 20 books on grief, I became an aficionado. And in 2001, one of my friends at church actually handed me a book, the Grief Recovery Handbook, the Action Program for Moving Beyond Death, Divorce, and Other Losses by John James and Russell Friedman. 2002, I got certified, and I began to run groups and do all this kind of stuff. And after I did, I began to look at then the losses that were coming up. So I'm still talking about loss, the loss of trust, the loss of safety. I think you got a slide on that, the loss of control of one's body, even though society doesn't even recognize those. Though, how many of us have experienced the death of a less than loved one? Now, that Brother Patrick, we ain't never heard of that. We heard of death of a loved one. What's the death of a less than loved one? Somebody that you're divorced from, or somebody that you're alienated from. And so folks feel, well, that's not going to be a problem because I'm glad they're gone. It doesn't work that way. You grieve those even more because of what's happening, what's taking place. We've been taught about safety. We've been taught about first aid. If you fell and broke your arm, we would know to call 911. But who do you call when your heart is broken? And how many of us have moved from one home to another before the age of 15? And your parents tell you, don't worry, you're going to get a better room. You're going to get your own room. I'm going to take you back to see your friends. If they did, thank them. But you're grieving. Children are grieving. What about the death of a relationship? Sometimes we enter relationships tentatively after that, a little bit more defensive. Brother Patrick, we tell children, they say, I'm in love and I'm hurt. And we're like, well, that's just puppy love. Well, it's puppy. It may be puppy love to us, but not to the puppy.
But nonetheless, it is. Absolutely.
That's right. It is. And think about the loss of trust in God. I don't think we've come there yet. How many of us have prayed and prayed and prayed, and we sang that song, prayed and cried and prayed and cried, and don't feel like God has answered? Then in a sense, we're grieving. It's important to understand these loss of trust events because they're so prevalent in America and in culture. And right now, we're dealing with a loss of trust events are experienced by almost all of us who have lifelong major negative impact. Think about this, Brother Patrick. Loss of trust. Can I trust the police? Can I trust America to give me what I need? I happen to strongly believe that category of loss is blocking my intimacy with God and blocking because of the circumstances that keep going on in my life. Brother Patrick, tell me, have you had any struggle with trusting God in the midst of all that was going on?
I've had that as well, to be honest. I know that there might be some that have zero struggle. I love the fact that I'm able to struggle because that lets me know I'm still alive. I'm still working through things. I'm still on my journey. And
Amen.
how important it is that, I think about these lost experiences. I've experienced the death of a loved one. I've experienced divorce. I've experienced moving from one state to the next. I've lost careers. I've gone through that. I've gone through health issues. It is interesting that as the loss in faith in God, the struggle has been more of an expectation at times that I want to see something manifest. I desire to see it come forward. I believe in hope in different aspects, but yet it appears and feels, and again, these are feelings. We're not talking about objective truth. We're talking about feelings. And so our feelings are very real when we have a theological perspective of a result of what we've prayed about or what we want to see happen, and it does not happen. And so sometimes in that hope process, we think that's equal to faith, and it's not. And I think it's important that we balance that out. And so those are aspects that I've dealt with, even in, going through this process of seeing other people suffer, struggling from a perspective of, do I trust the police, the law enforcement agencies that's designed to help protect me? But what I'm seeing and what I'm viewing, there's a loss of faith. God, wow, you're allowing this to happen. There are theological questions. There are ontological questions. All those things are there. And so, yes, I've gone through that particular journey. The saving grace has been, and come, let us reason together. The saving grace has been, and having conversations like this, and not just visually here on the stream, but dialogue that helps us strengthen each other. So those are some aspects that I have struggled with in terms of just faith challenge.
Brother Patrick, that's the reason why the way we work together is so incredible, because we are covering very important things, and you're sharing your heart, which allows people to kind of hone in and to say, yeah, I can relate to that, and talk about these important things. And so what takes place in this process is that then we got to deal with the information and how people respond to us, what they say to us. And I tell folks at funerals sometimes that when you remember that when people come up and say something to you really crazy, see them having a wheelchair on their head. They're mentally challenged. They don't know what to say. And so they're saying things they should not say, like, don't feel bad. By the time a child is an adult, he or she has received 23,000 messages that sad is bad. So I don't want to talk. That's the reason why, another reason why we're pushing these things down. Sad is bad, and I'm not going to be bad. I don't want people to see me as something wrong with me, but sad is not bad. Here's another one: replace the loss. So, and we grew up in a society, in my era, where if you lose something, we want to replace it. We have to help our children. You lost your toy, don't worry, we'll replace it. You dropped your ice cream cone, don't worry, I'll get you another. I make people laugh. You know, you lost your wife, don't worry, we'll get you another one. We just want to replace the loss, and that's a part of grieving, and not really. We haven't grieved it. We're just trying to move on. And so sometimes, for instance, with a child, the dog will die. We want to get him another one. They don't bond to it. We're saying, I don't know. Why don't you bond? You got a new dog. Because I haven't grieved the old one yet. Another perspective, grieve alone. Some of us just shut up. Some think grieving just takes time. And if that's you, then the next time you get a flat tire, I want you to go out and get a chair and just sit by and see if time heals that tire. You shouldn't feel guilty, or you shouldn't regret the past, or forget the relationship or the person. Or people say to you, be strong for others. And how tough it is when we say that to children. Or keep busy. So when we say these kind of things, we are not dealing with grief. We are attempting to cope in our own ways. And that is all flowing out of misinformation and myths about grief. We got to face the fact that we're ill prepared to help others deal with loss because we haven't dealt with our own losses. We haven't worked through our own perspective. And so they're not trying to hurt us. They just are saying the things that they have heard. But they shouldn't say them. These are things you should never say to a grieving person. I hope y'all are online are getting this. I know how you feel. You can't know how I feel, because all relationships are unique. And if all relationships are unique, then our feelings about them are unique. Now, you can't say, I know how I felt when I lost my mother, but you can't say, you know how I feel, because she's not your mother.
Correct.
When I touch, be strong for, or be grateful you had them so long. What does that mean? So I'll be happy now, keep busy. He or she led a full life. Okay, and what does that mean? I mean, I shouldn't be sad. Or please don't say this. It was just God's will. Try to explain to a child after you just got through telling them that God took their parent, that it was God's will. Or you should be over it by now. Nobody knows how long it takes you to get over it. Or it just takes time. When you make those kind of intellectual statements, people don't have a broken brain. They have a broken heart. Brother Patrick, did anybody say any of don't name them, but did anybody say any of those kind of things to you?
Well, I can tell you this. I got more spiritualized annotations and spiritualized quotes, so I can relate to this. And I'm also thinking, even from a perspective of divorce, a perspective of what I've been challenged in, it's amazing that there's this lack of empathic listening, this empathic silence that needs to take place. I like to call it the ministry of presence, or empathic silence that says,
that's good.
I have nothing to say, yet my goal is to be empathetic. And that's what I experienced. I mean, we're experiencing now as far as collective grief is concerned. Oh, well, we should just trust the system. Just trust that it's going to work out, and we're not allowed to grieve collectively. We're not allowed to grieve in a communal context. we're not allowed to grieve, or we're told not to grieve. We better just accept it. Sooner we'll be done with the troubles of the world. I'll go home to live with God.
Yep.
And that's exactly how it has to be done. Ride on King Jesus. No man can hinder me. Don't worry about how I feel. And
Brother
yet
Patrick, we use another analogy. We use another analogy, and that is, or metaphor, a heart with ears. That when you listen, you just are a heart, and you have ears to hear what people are saying. And you know, it's really powerful right now. I'm dealing with lots of wonderful, dear white brothers and sisters and white churches, and they want to know, what can we do? What can we do about what's going on? And one of the things you can do is listen. Listening can be very therapeutic, very supportive. That for the first time, maybe in our lives, we are now feeling our feelings. Will you allow us to feel those? Can you just listen to where we are? That's difficult stuff. And so here's some reasons why others around us don't know what to say. They are afraid of our feelings. They don't want to deal with their own feelings. And so they are afraid of our feelings because our feelings may trigger their feelings. Or, as you mentioned, they intellectualize our feelings. We have the way in the church of saying, you know, I'm too blessed to be stressed. You know, the intellectualizing, you know, that everything is going to be all right, rather than facing them. Or we spiritualize our feelings. God is up to something. God wants to teach me something in this moment. Well, he may. But right now, you're in pain.
Right.
Or they don't simply hear what we say because they're not fully present, or maybe they don't want to talk about grief. Please be aware of the fact that we cannot help people complete the pain in their relationship when we are incomplete. So we need to get out of the way. I've done a lot of teaching and try to help leaders to understand that if you got issues you haven't grieved, if you are not healthy, then it's going to be difficult for you to lead people into health that you haven't experienced. And even though grief is normal and grief is natural, we don't talk about it. We often mislabel it. We call it burnout. We call it pressure, stress, free-floating anxiety, depression, but we don't call it grief, and we don't deal with it as grief. So let's talk a little bit, Brother Patrick. You're doing such a wonderful job. I love to do these with you because I believe we're helping people.
Yes.
What happens when you don't grieve? The death of a loved one, divorce, or all other losses produce an incredible amount of emotional energy. And since we've all been socialized from early on to deal with sad or painful or negative emotions incorrectly, we end up storing the energy inside of ourselves. We swallow our pain. A caretaker may say, don't cry, have a cookie, you'll feel better, setting a child up with a lifetime belief from an authority figure that feelings can be fixed with food. Now, Brother Patrick, I don't want you to go off here, but I'm going to mention a line from the Matrix because I know how deep you are about this stuff.
All right now.
But that one line from the Matrix when the Oracle said to Neo, all right, well, have a cookie. See, upon eating the cookie, the child feels different, not better, and for the moment is distracted and forgets about the loss event. However, there's no completion of the emotional pain, and the events and the feelings attached to it are now buried under the cookie and the sugar and the distraction. So early on, you asked this question, and we've been touching on it. We learn to cover up, to hide, to bury our feelings under food. Now, this applies to alcohol, drugs. It also happens to be I've observed family members at funerals. And remember now, in the African-American community, we're gonna fry you some chicken.
Yes,
we're gonna make you a pound cake. And when you eat this, all your issues are gonna be taken care of. And so food and alcohol are obvious, what we call short-term energy relieving behaviors. There are many, many short-term energy relieving behaviors that keep us from going down into what we need to deal with. Here's a partial list.
Okay. Yeah, the short term, that's incredible. Let's dive into that. Go ahead.
Food can be one way of not dealing with issues. And, you know, sometimes, Brother Patrick, people talk to me because they don't know I'm a real person. They think I just appear in the pulpit, disappear, and then rematerialize the next Sunday. They don't know that they look at me and say, "Oh, you look so trim. You look so." I'm struggling. I want to eat the world up,
Yeah.
because when I eat, there are feelings and endorphins that come that make you feel like you're loved. So we do that. Alcohol and drugs. Some people use anger. Some people use exercise, which wouldn't be a bad one, but they go so deep that they're running um, triathlons and trying to run 100 miles and kill themselves. We got fantasy, which used to be books, but not anymore. Now it's movies and TV. So, a lot of people in trouble when they can't go to the movies. So that's all right. They've been watching TV.
Yeah.
Or isolation, or sex, or one we call shopping. Humorously, we call it retail therapy, or
I'm
workaholism.
guilty of that.
Many of these actions are not harmful in of themselves. They become harmful when you engage them for the wrong reason. Brother Patrick, is there any on that list that you can relate to?
I would say probably totality in some aspect. It's interesting. I like shopping. I like antiques. I like going to thrift stores. My family knows I'm the thrift king. And it's interesting because I go to that because my mother used to take me to antique shops and used to take me to thrift stores when I was very young. We lived in Sumter, South Carolina. Those are some of my first memories of comfort. So I go, I may not even buy anything, but I'll peruse. And some people say, well, that's just not me. That's not my personality, blah, blah, blah. But that experience is connected to the comfort of my mother. It's connected to, even though it's short term, I'm learning that, wow, I'm realizing it's a short-term area. Sometimes it's eating. Sometimes it's that Krispy Kreme spirit. That I'm like, Lord, I need help. I see that.
Brother Patrick, I've been wanting some Krispy Kremes. I've been wanting some Krispy Kremes. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to do it. I got to tell you this, but you mentioned that. I was going somewhere and I went past a Krispy Kreme store in our area. There were, I think, 40 cars out there in line. So there is some power in.
Oh, there is. Krispy Kreme. I'm telling you, grief recovery, go to Krispy Kreme. But
telling you,
I tell you, and yeah, I think that. And then there's also things where we have short terms, but at the same time, we don't want to get into the short term. Again, that's the key word, short term. And we're dealing with energy, we're dealing with how we are feeling. And it's important that we begin to be aware that I got to do the work to make sure that this short-term energy, this particular solution, it really isn't a solution. It is temporary and it doesn't help me in that particular journey.
Now, Brother Patrick, we're getting ready to get real in trouble here right now, but I'm glad I got you on here to help me.
Yes.
Because one stirb that we don't talk about is religion. Now, I didn't say Christianity. I didn't say relationship with God. I said religion. Religion is humanity reaching up to God. Christianity is God reaching down to humanity. Religion is humanity working to please God, something that you cannot achieve through work, but only through accepting the price that was paid by Jesus. So this pattern of working to please God becomes a short-term energy releasing behavior. Thus, many people seek God, not because they want to have a relationship with him, but to manipulate him to relieve pain in their lives.
Very true.
And that stirb can become as addictive and destructive as any other, because religion drives people. But the love of Jesus Christ draws people.
Yes.
While many short-term relievers are apparent, religion is not apparent. It's not uncommon, though, for people to visit the gravesite on a regular basis, to unconsciously, we're seeking somehow to relieve that pain. And since we intellectually know that these things don't work and they can become destructive, why do we get trapped in them? The answer is stated in a grief recovery truism. When your heart is broken, your head doesn't work.
Does not work. There it is.
And your spirit can't soar. So you're not planning to do this. You're smarter than that, but you don't have a broken head. You got a broken heart.
Yeah.
And because you have a broken heart, you get trapped into doing. Can you think, I'm gonna ask you a hard question. Can you think of any irrational things that you did while you were grieving?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think irrational, oversleeping, irrational, not even getting up to take a shower one time, believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds crazy, but it was irrational. Like, I'm just not going to get out of bed. I'm going to stay in bed. I don't want to get out. I'll just go to the refrigerator, eat what I need to eat, and get back in my bed, thinking that was going to solve it. Sounds funny now, but it was a real experience.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff there, because
It was a real
we
experience.
are seeking to survive at that moment,
Yeah.
and we're using all that we have. So I can hear somebody saying, Brother Patrick, that's good stuff. What does the Bible have to say about that?
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah 1:5, New Living Translation. Why do you continue to invite punishment? Must you rebel forever? Your head is injured. Your heart is sick. That's almost the exact same thing that the grief recovery truism says. When your heart is broken,
Mm-hmm.
your head doesn't work right,
Mm-hmm.
and your spirit can't soar. The human spirit is burdened, it's weighed down, it's imprisoned. We were created to be eagles and to soar high above the burdens of life, but instead we find ourselves pecking around in the barnyard of life with the chickens. That's a sad image,
Mm-hmm.
and we should be so much further. So the grief recovery method, let's talk about that a little bit more.
Okay.
It's a tool, but it's a tool. Grief itself is a spiritual discipline that the Bible talks about, that's experienced by Jesus, that was used to procure salvation, that was arranged by the Father to cleanse and heal our hearts and to woo us back to himself. So that's a little bit about what has been your spiritual perspective of grief, Brother Patrick.
I think now that I'm seeing myself emerge through multiple perspectives of, or multiple seasons of compounded grief, my spiritual perspective is that it is normal, it is natural and neutral. And in the sense that it's not, it's to be engaged because God has created our souls to connect to the earth and what we're feeling. And so because we are emotional beings and God has created our emotions, God wants to be able to be touched by the feelings of our infirmities. And so now, being able to understand that God has created our emotions for us to work through our journeys versus not working and not acknowledging it. Spiritualization says it's going to be all right. It is going to be all right, but that doesn't mean how I feel is all right. And that it's important for me to acknowledge it is okay to feel what I feel, to understand why I feel the way that I feel, and also to know that Christ is touched by the feelings of my infirmities. I began to think about the text where it says Jesus he was acquainted with grief. He had a relationship with suffering and incredible losses. And yet we at times, because of religion, want to control the spiritual narrative. That if it doesn't come out the way that I wanted to come out, then something is wrong with my faith, and that's just not the truth. So I think it's important that we see not only the God of the goal, but also the God of the journey.
Well, Patrick, that's outstanding sharing. I'm so glad that you are on this with me and sharing in this kind of way. Let me just ask the question. I got people working outside my house. Can you hear them, or am I okay?
Oh, you're good. Go ahead, sir.
Good. All right. Well, one of the things that we are doing right now is we're talking about how we process grief. And one thing that happens is that it becomes energy that we end up swallowing down. And it can be like we're talking about, I got this little kettle that I use sometimes. I didn't bring it, but it deals with the fact that I take this kettle up and I got a red cork and I paint it red, and I put it in the spout and ask people what's going to happen if I heat it up. It's like a pressure cooker. If you keep heating it up without a release, it's going to explode. Well, when we are pushing down sad feelings, pushing down negative emotions, pushing down and never having any release valve, after a while, there's going to be an explosion. And when our release valve is blocked, that's when we're participating in short-term energy relieving behaviors. Now, there are three major problems, and you already began to touch on them with STIRBs. Number one is they appear to work. They create an illusion of recovery, by causing you to forget or to bury your emotions. Now, no, I didn't say they work. I said they appear to work.
Mm-hmm.
The second problem is you mentioned they are short term. They don't last. You have to keep doing them over and over again. They're like Lay's potato chips. Nobody can eat just one. You got to keep eating them and eating them and eating them. And then that creates another problem. And by the way, consider three major ways that we try to deal with pain. The sinner and the carnal believer tries to anesthetize the pain.
Mm-hmm.
We just try to get rid of it through pleasure. The normal believer denies or blunts any desire. I don't really want that. I don't need anything. I'm okay. But the wise spirit controlled person will acknowledge their desire, surrender it to God, and then allow God to work so that they might work into intimacy with God. The last problem with STIRBs is that they don't do anything to remove the cord that's jammed in the spout.
Yeah.
That thing which is keeping you from processing your pain is not dealt with. And so the accumulation of grief issues, because grief is cumulative, will eventually lead to an explosion. If you're listening, have you ever had an emotional explosion larger than the circumstances call for? Sadly, if you are any relationships, you have to say yes. Bottling up your feelings can lead to an explosion. You keep bottling them up and not saying anything and not saying anything. And the next thing you know, you're exploding. Well, the same thing happens in this area. If you keep bottling grief, pushing it down, then you're going to have an explosion. That explosion may be sexual infidelity. That explosion may be financial indiscretion. That explosion may be irrational theft, violent anger. But there's going to be an explosion because you're pushing down this negative energy, but you are not processing it or allowing it to be dissipated. So what we do, Brother Patrick, is after a while, we figure out what to do. We call it award-winning recovery.
Award-winning recovery.
I just put on a happy face, and then people will leave me alone.
Wear the mask.
They stop asking me about my trouble. I start giving them pious platitudes. I'm blessed. You know, God's been better to me than I've been to my, and they just they leave me alone.
Right.
They don't bother me. But I'm not any better. I'm still in trouble. So when we come to this point, we begin to act like that we think that there's something wrong with us because of what's going on. We feel like an alien because nobody seems to be talking to us. I'm trying to talk about it. Nobody wants to say anything. Let me assure you, there is nothing wrong with you. You seek to process grief because there's something right with you. Grief is a normal, natural part of life. And the problem is that there's not much good information on grief. So from 1982 to 2001, I read everything I could, and that's what led me to this grief recovery handbook that I got excited about and started sharing about. Brother Patrick, what's your thoughts on that so far right there?
I think that, you know, when I think about grief and I think about the journey, that grief is a gift to invite you to the journey of healing. And how important it is that as we don't put on masks, I'm reminded of the Paul Laurence Dunbar poem, "We wear the mask that grins and lies, that hides our cheeks and shades our eyes," and how it really hides where we are. And if we hide where we are and we don't own where we are, the grief gift helps us have access to that journey. And I think that that's one of the key things that I want us to be able to hone in on is inviting people to the table of grief, to the conversation of grief, that your losses, whether it be a loss from childhood. Some of us, even on this live today, have had losses from childhood through physical abuse, through sexual abuse, through bullying, through teasing. There's been a lot of things, and yet never were able to express that it is fine and well to walk into the gift of grief so that you can move into the journey of healing. But yet how many people, I think about how many of us have stuffed it away or suppressed it away. And it's not that we were deliberate or intentional, it's just that we didn't know any other way. because we were never really encouraged, or we didn't have atmospheres to where we could disarm the mask, or we were around intellectualizing and spiritualizing and not being able to allow ourselves to grieve. And so I think that this conversation today is going to help people, begin to understand what grief really is and how the giftedness of grief helps us acknowledge where we are, but also help us move on to the path of being in a place of healing. So I think that's so critical that we're covering the masking mechanisms that we use that prohibit us from a true healing journey in grief.
Well, Patrick, I'm saying it over and over again that people are going to wonder why I think you're so wonderful, because I say he keeps saying it over and over, because this discussion is so important
Yeah.
and so powerful. And I think we've probably covered as much information as we need to cover right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to say something to the audience. You cannot heal from something that you are unaware of. Awareness is the first step. So that's the reason why today we talked about awareness, what's taking place, disturbs, the things that are going on. In our next session, we're going to begin to talk about what the grief recovery method is. Get to that first question that Brother Patrick asked me that I wouldn't answer. And dealing with how do we define grief? What is grief made up of? And then begin to talk about how we process the grief and what we can do about that. The next probably one more session, we'll probably get through it. I don't know. We're getting deep. It could be two.
Yeah.
But you need to come back in after today, so that we can do this and continue to work. Now you're starting to have an awareness, but now we need to start talking about, what do I need to do to process this grief? And so I want to assure you that we're going to get there. It's important. It's important to me. It's important to Apostle Patrick that we help you move to a point where we're just trying to facilitate a meeting with you and God, so that he can begin to bring healing into your life. Brother Patrick, you want to say some closing words?
Yeah, I just want to encourage us to move towards grief, not away from it, to move towards this conversation of awareness, to move towards the authenticity of recognizing what's there. I also want to encourage us that we are transparent with those we trust, although we are authentic with everyone. And so authenticity is about an awareness of how I feel. Transparency is understanding why I feel the way I feel within the context of those loving, compassionate relationships and that empathic silence that they provide. And so I think today we were able to accomplish a good foundation within the time frame that we have. We can get into a conversation later on methodologies, but I think it's important that first of all, we got to get ready, aim, and then we can fire later. We don't want to fire now. I think it's important that we get ready with our understanding, and then we can aim on ourselves and empathizing with those that are around us, their grief journeys as well. So I just wanted to give those parting words to us.
Okay, if you don't mind, Brother Patrick, I'm going to pray.
Yes, let's do that.
And then we can be out. Father, there's somebody that's watching right now that needs your touch, that needs to know what you promised, that I will never leave you, nor will I ever forsake you. There's somebody right now who is experiencing not just one grief, but cumulative grief events, and who needs your help. I pray that today's live broadcast, and perhaps when they pick it up later by recording, it will move deeply. You will speak to them and move them to a sense and a place of healing in their lives. Thank you for their lives. Thank you for allowing them to come across this. Thank you for Brother Patrick and all that he's doing with the slides and all that he is making available for us in order to be able to see people get help. We place this in your hand. We know that you are the ultimate healer. You are Jehovah Rapha. You are the Lord, that God that heals. And so we place it in your hand. We thank you for this medium and this opportunity. And we pray it in Jesus' name. And amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, everyone, for connecting today.
Thank you, brother.
Have a great afternoon.